In a world where success often feels out of reach for many, Alexandra Hart's journey stood as a beacon of hope and determination. Born into a modest family in a small town, she grew up watching her parents work tirelessly to make ends meet. Her father was a mechanic, and her mother cleaned offices late at night, but they always found time to instill in Alexandra the value of hard work, education, and resilience. From a young age, Alexandra dreamed big. She would sit by the window of their tiny apartment, flipping through glossy magazines filled with pictures of luxurious hotels and exotic destinations. To her, these places weren't just symbols of wealth. They represented dreams, possibilities, and escape from the struggles of everyday life. As she grew older, Alexandra realized that owning a hotel wasn't just about luxury. It was about creating spaces where people could feel safe, welcomed, and inspired. But getting there wouldn't be easy. After graduating at the top of her class, she faced countless rejections when applying for jobs in the hospitality industry. Some employers outright dismissed her because of her background, while others subtly hinted that she didn't fit the image they were looking for. Yet every rejection only fueled her fire. She took on odd jobs during the day and studied business management at night, determined to carve her own path. Her breakthrough came when she saved enough money to buy a rundown bed and breakfast in a quiet neighborhood. With no experience in renovations, she rolled up her sleeves and got to work, painting walls, fixing leaky faucets, and even cooking meals for guests herself. Slowly but surely, word spread about the warm hospitality and attention to detail at Alexandra's little inn. It wasn't long before bookings started pouring in, and what began as a modest venture turned into a thriving business. But Alexandra didn't stop there. She reinvested her earnings into expanding her brand, acquiring smaller properties and transforming them into havens of comfort and elegance. Her unique approach, combining personalized service with modern amenities, set her apart from competitors. Within a decade, Alexandra had built one of the most respected names in the hospitality industry, earning accolades and admiration along the way. Despite her achievements, Alexandra remained grounded. She knew firsthand how difficult it was to climb the ladder, especially as a black woman in an industry dominated by men. That's why she made it her mission to create opportunities for others who faced similar challenges. Under her leadership, her company became known not only for its exceptional hotels, but also for its commitment to diversity and inclusion. Employees were treated like family, and customers felt valued from the moment they walked through the door. Little did Alexandra know, however, that her toughest challenge still lay ahead. Just when she thought she had conquered every obstacle, a single incident would test her resolve and force her to confront the very biases she had spent years fighting against. Months after the incident that had shaken her to her core, Alexandra found herself standing on a stage bathed in soft golden light. The hotel's grand ballroom was filled with guests, industry leaders, activists, journalists, and employees, all gathered for a gala honoring trailblazers in business and social impact. As she looked out at the sea of faces, Alexandra couldn't help but reflect on how far she'd come since that fateful night when she was denied a room in her own hotel. The MC introduced her with glowing praise, calling her a visionary who turned adversity into opportunity. When it was her turn to speak, Alexandra stepped up to the microphone, her presence commanding yet warm. She began by acknowledging the pain of that initial rejection, but quickly shifted to gratitude for the lessons learned, the people who supported her, and the chance to create lasting change. This journey hasn't been easy, she admitted, her voice steady, but tinged with emotion. There were moments when I wanted to give up, when the weight of what we were trying to accomplish felt overwhelming. But then I remembered why I started this fight, not just for myself, but for everyone who has ever felt invisible or unwelcome because of who they are. She went on to share stories of transformation within the hotel, from employees who had embraced the new training programs and become advocates for inclusivity, to guests who had written heartfelt letters about feeling seen and valued for the first time. One story stood out. A young black woman visiting the city for a job interview had checked into the hotel and later told staff, "For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to prove I belonged here. Thank you for making me feel at home." That single comment, Alexandra said, reminded her why every challenge had been worth it. As she spoke, the audience hung on her every word. Some nodded in agreement, others wiped away tears. Even those who had once doubted her intentions now clapped enthusiastically, moved by her sincerity and vision. When she finished her speech, the room erupted into applause, a standing ovation that seemed to go on forever. After the event, Alexandra mingled with attendees, shaking hands and posing for photos. Former critics approached her to apologize, admitting they had underestimated her resolve. Employees thanked her for giving them a workplace where they felt respected and empowered. And strangers shared how her story had inspired them to confront injustices in their own lives. Later that evening, as Alexandra walked through the hotel's lobby, she paused to take it all in. The space buzzed with energy, guests laughing over drinks, families checking in with smiles, staff members greeting everyone with genuine warmth. It was a stark contrast to the cold, unwelcoming atmosphere she had encountered months earlier. This was her legacy, not just a successful business, but a community built on trust, respect, and equality. Though Alexandra knew the work was never truly done, there would always be more barriers to break and minds to change. She allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. She had proven that leadership wasn't about power or titles. It was about using your influence to lift others up. Her journey had taught her that even the most painful experiences could lead to growth, if you were brave enough to face them head-on. As she finally headed to her suite that night, Alexandra smiled to herself. The hotel no longer felt like a place where she didn't belong. It was hers, not just in ownership, but in spirit. And as long as she led with courage and compassion, it would continue to be a haven for anyone seeking refuge from a world too often divided by prejudice. Her story was proof that while injustice might knock on your door, resilience could answer and transform the entire house. It was a chilly autumn evening, and Alexandra Hart was exhausted. After spending the entire day in back-to-back meetings to finalize plans for her newest acquisition, a luxury boutique hotel chain, she decided to treat herself to a quiet night at one of the properties she now owned. The hotel, located in the heart of a bustling city, was known for its opulent interiors, world-class service, and breathtaking views of the skyline. For Alexandra, this visit wasn't just about relaxation. It was also an opportunity to experience firsthand what made this particular property so special. Dressed in a stylish yet understated outfit, a tailored blazer over jeans and comfortable boots, Alexandra pulled up to the grand entrance of the hotel. Valets rushed to assist her, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride as she stepped into the lavish lobby. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above, soft piano music played in the background, and the scent of fresh flowers filled the air. This was exactly the kind of atmosphere she wanted to preserve and enhance under her leadership. With a polite smile, Alexandra approached the front desk, where a young man greeted her with a rehearsed warmth. "Good evening," she said, pulling out her phone to show the reservation confirmation. "I have a room booked under my name, Alexandra Hart." She expected a quick check-in process, perhaps even a complimentary upgrade considering her status as the owner. Instead, the man's demeanor shifted almost imperceptibly. His smile faltered, and he glanced at his computer screen before shaking his head. "I'm sorry, Mom," he replied, avoiding eye contact. "We don't seem to have any rooms available under that name." Alexandra frowned, confused. "That's strange," she said calmly, holding up her phone. "Here's the confirmation email. I received it earlier today." The clerk barely glanced at the screen before responding. "There must be some mistake. We're fully booked tonight." Something about his tone didn't sit right with Alexandra. Fully booked. That seemed unlikely for such a large property. Determined to resolve the issue, she tried again. "Could you double-check?" Maybe there was a mix-up with the system. This time, the clerk sighed audibly, as if annoyed by her persistence. "Ma'am, I assure you, there are no rooms available. Perhaps you should try another hotel." The words stung more than Alexandra cared to admit. She had been in situations like this before, times when people underestimated her or dismissed her because of how she looked. But she never imagined it would happen in a place she now owned. Still, she refused to make a scene. Instead, she took a step back, observing the situation with growing frustration. Moments later, another guest approached the desk, a white man wearing casual clothes similar to hers. He asked for a room without providing any identification or proof of reservation. To Alexandra's disbelief, the same clerk who had just turned her away greeted him enthusiastically. "Of course, sir. Let me find something perfect for you." Watching the interaction unfold, Alexandra felt a knot form in her stomach. It wasn't just about being denied a room. It was about the blatant double standard. Here she was, the CEO of the company that owned this very hotel, and yet she was treated like an inconvenience while someone else received preferential treatment without question. As she stood there, gripping her phone tightly, Alexandra realized this wasn't simply a case of poor customer service. It was discrimination, plain and simple. And though she could have stormed off in anger, something inside her clicked. This moment wasn't just personal. It was emblematic of larger issues within the industry she loved. Rather than letting it break her spirit, Alexandra resolved to turn this painful experience into an opportunity for change. But first, she needed proof and a plan. As Alexandra stepped out of the hotel lobby, her mind raced with a mix of emotions: humiliation, anger, and disbelief. She had faced prejudice before in her life, but this was different. This wasn't just some random encounter. It was happening in a place she now owned, a property under her leadership. The weight of the situation hit her hard, but instead of letting frustration consume her, Alexandra's sharp instincts kicked in. She knew better than to let raw emotion dictate her actions. After all, she hadn't built an empire by reacting impulsively. Walking briskly toward her car, Alexandra pulled out her phone and dialed one of her closest colleagues, Marcus, who had been by her side since the early days of her business. "Marcus," she said, her voice calm but firm, "I need your help with something urgent. Can you meet me tomorrow morning at my office? There's a situation we need to address." Once home, Alexandra sat down at her desk, her thoughts swirling like a storm. She replayed the scene in her mind. The dismissive tone of the clerk, the way he avoided eye contact, and then the stark contrast when the white guest walked in moments later. It wasn't just about her personal experience. It was a glaring example of systemic bias that likely affected countless others. And if such discrimination could happen to her, someone in a position of immense power and privilege, what did that mean for people without her resources or influence? Determined to get to the bottom of things, Alexandra began drafting a plan. First, she needed evidence, solid proof that what she experienced wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a pattern. She decided to send 2 trusted team members back to the hotel undercover: Marcus, who was black, and Sarah, a white colleague. Both would attempt to book rooms using identical profiles, clothing styles, and requests. If the results matched her suspicions, Alexandra would have undeniable proof of discriminatory practices. The next morning, Alexandra met with Marcus and Sarah in her sleek, sunlit office. Over coffee, she explained the situation in detail, showing them screenshots of her reservation confirmation and recounting the events of the previous night. "This isn't just about me," she emphasized, leaning forward. "It's about exposing the truth and holding people accountable. I want to know exactly how deep this goes." Marcus nodded, his expression serious. "You can count on us, Alex. We'll document everything." Sarah chimed in, visibly upset by the story. "This is unacceptable. No one should be treated this way, especially not you, or anyone else, for that matter." With their roles clearly defined, the trio spent the rest of the day preparing for the operation. They created fake personas, complete with matching credit cards and email addresses. Alexandra reminded them to record every interaction discreetly, ensuring they captured both verbal exchanges and body language. By the time they left her office, Alexandra felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. Later that evening, as she sat alone in her living room sipping tea, Alexandra allowed herself a moment of reflection. She thought about the young clerk at the front desk, wondering whether he truly believed what he was doing was acceptable, or if he was simply following orders from higher-ups. Was he acting out of ignorance, fear, or outright prejudice? Whatever the reason, Alexandra knew that addressing the problem wouldn't be as simple as firing one person. Real change required digging deeper, exposing flawed systems, challenging toxic cultures, and implementing lasting reforms. For now, though, Alexandra focused on the task ahead. She couldn't wait to see the outcome of Marcus and Sarah's mission. Once she had concrete evidence, she would strike swiftly and decisively. But more importantly, she vowed to use this painful experience as fuel, not just to punish wrongdoing, but to create a brighter, fairer future for everyone involved. Little did the hotel staff know, their dismissive behavior toward their boss was about to spark a revolution they wouldn't soon forget. The conference room at the hotel's headquarters was tense. Alexandra sat at the head of the long, polished table, her posture calm but commanding. Around her were the hotel's senior management team, executives who had spent years overseeing operations, making decisions, and shaping the culture of the property. They had been summoned without much explanation, only told that this meeting was mandatory and urgent. Some looked curious, others nervous, but none could have anticipated what was about to unfold. Alexandra opened the discussion with a simple statement. "Thank you all for coming. I want to address an issue that has come to my attention recently, an issue that goes against everything our company stands for." Her voice was steady, but there was an edge to it that made everyone sit up straighter. She began by recounting her own experience at the front desk, the denial of service despite having a confirmed reservation. At first, the executives exchanged uneasy glances, unsure how to respond. One of them, a middle-aged man named Richard, cleared his throat and offered a weak apology. "Ms. Hart, if there was any misunderstanding, we deeply regret it. We'll speak to the staff involved immediately." But Alexandra wasn't satisfied with platitudes. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes locking onto Richard's. "It wasn't just a misunderstanding," she said firmly. Then, she pressed play on a laptop connected to a projector screen. The footage from Marcus and Sarah's visits filled the wall behind her. Everyone in the room watched silently as the stark contrast between their treatment played out in vivid detail. When the video ended, the silence was deafening. No one dared to speak. Alexandra broke it with a single question. "Does anyone care to explain why two people asking for the exact same thing were treated so differently?" A younger woman, likely a mid-level manager, stammered, I don't know what happened here. Maybe it was just a mistake." "A mistake?" Alexandra interrupted, her tone sharp enough to cut through the excuse. "This isn't an isolated incident. We've reviewed months of security footage, guest feedback, and internal documents. This is a pattern, a culture, and it starts at the top." Her words hung heavy in the air. The executives shifted uncomfortably, some avoiding eye contact altogether. Finally, Richard spoke again, his voice defensive. "Look, Ms. Hart, these kinds of things happen sometimes. It's not like we encourage discrimination. But you have to understand, managing a luxury hotel means catering to certain expectations. Sometimes, staff make judgment calls based on, well, appearances." Alexandra's expression darkened. "Judgment calls? You're telling me your employees are deciding who deserves service based on how someone looks? That's not a judgment call. That's prejudice. And it's unacceptable." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in before continuing. "This behavior doesn't just hurt guests. It damages our reputation, demoralizes employees, and undermines everything I've worked for. So here's what's going to change, starting today. She outlined her plan with precision: mandatory diversity and inclusion training for all staff, revised hiring practices to ensure equal opportunities, and the immediate dismissal of key personnel directly responsible for fostering this toxic environment. She also announced the creation of a new role, a Chief Equity Officer, who would oversee compliance and report directly to her. To drive her point home, Alexandra shared data showing how discriminatory practices affected customer satisfaction scores and revenue. Fixing this isn't just the right thing to do. It's good business, she concluded. If anyone disagrees or refuses to cooperate, you can find another job. Because under my leadership, this kind of behavior ends now. As the meeting adjourned, the executives filed out quietly, their faces pale. For the first time, they realized they were dealing with someone who wouldn't back down, not for excuses, not for resistance, and certainly not for fear of rocking the boat. Alexandra had drawn a line in the sand, and she expected everyone to step up, or step aside. The moment Alexandra decided to go public with her experience, she knew it would be a risk. Sharing such a personal and painful story could open her up to criticism, skepticism, or even backlash. But Alexandra wasn't one to shy away from challenges, especially when they had the potential to spark meaningful change. She sat down in her home office late one evening, drafting a heartfelt post for her social media accounts. Her words were simple yet powerful, describing how she had been denied service at her own hotel simply because of the color of her skin. "I never imagined I'd face discrimination in a place I now own," she wrote. "But this isn't just about me. It's about every person who has ever walked into a business and felt unwelcome because of who they are. It's time we talk about these issues openly and work together to create spaces where everyone feels valued." When the post went live early the next morning, it spread like wildfire. Within hours, thousands of people had shared it, leaving comments of support, outrage, and solidarity. Many praised Alexandra for her courage, calling her a role model for speaking out against injustice. Others began sharing their own stories of being mistreated in hotels, restaurants, and other establishments. One woman recounted how she was ignored at a cafe, while white customers were served immediately. A man described being asked to prepay for his meal at a restaurant, despite having dined there regularly for years. The floodgates had opened, and the conversation quickly grew beyond Alexandra's individual experience. Major news outlets picked up the story, inviting Alexandra to appear on television and radio shows to discuss the issue further. During one interview, a journalist asked her why she chose to make the incident public instead of handling it privately. Alexandra responded without hesitation. "Silence only protects the status quo," she said. "If I stayed quiet, nothing would change. By sharing my story, I hope to shine a light on the systemic biases that exist not just in hospitality, but in every industry. We can't fix what we refuse to acknowledge." Her transparency struck a chord with audiences worldwide. People admired her willingness to use her platform for good, turning a deeply personal moment into an opportunity for advocacy. Social media hashtags like #EqualServiceForAll and #InclusionMatters began trending, amplifying the call for accountability and reform. Activists and organizations reached out to collaborate with Alexandra, eager to partner with someone who understood the importance of representation and fairness. At the same time, some critics questioned whether Alexandra was overreacting or using the incident as a publicity stunt. A few online trolls accused her of exaggerating the situation to gain attention, but Alexandra refused to engage with negativity. Instead, she focused on the overwhelming support she received and the real-world impact her actions were having. Several major hotel chains contacted her to learn more about implementing diversity training programs similar to hers. Lawmakers even cited her story during discussions about anti-discrimination legislation in the hospitality sector. What made Alexandra's approach so effective was her ability to balance strength with grace. She didn't just point fingers. She offered solutions. In interviews, she emphasized the need for empathy and education in combating bias. "We're all human," she said during a live stream, "and humans make mistakes. But the difference lies in whether we choose to learn from those mistakes and grow. My goal isn't to shame anyone. It's to inspire change." By the end of the week, Alexandra's story had ignited a global movement. Thousands of employees in the hospitality industry came forward to share their own struggles with discriminatory practices, both as workers and guests. Hotels around the world started reviewing their policies, pledging to do better. For Alexandra, this was exactly what she had hoped for, a ripple effect that extended far beyond her initial confrontation at the front desk. As the dust settled, Alexandra reflected on the power of vulnerability and truth-telling. Going public hadn't just exposed wrongdoing. It had created a sense of unity among people determined to fight for equality. And though the road ahead would still be long, Alexandra felt hopeful. Change was possible, and she was leading the charge. In the weeks following her public disclosure, Alexandra rolled up her sleeves and got to work transforming the hotel chain into a model of inclusivity and excellence. She knew that meaningful change couldn't happen overnight, but she was determined to set a new standard, not just for her company, but for the entire industry. Every decision she made was guided by one core principle: everyone deserved to feel welcome, respected, and valued. The first step was implementing mandatory diversity and inclusivity training for every employee, from housekeeping staff to senior executives. Unlike generic seminars that often felt like box-checking exercises, Alexandra ensured the program was interactive, engaging, and deeply personal. She brought in expert facilitators who used real-life scenarios to help employees understand unconscious biases and how they could manifest in everyday interactions. Role-playing exercises allowed participants to see things from different perspectives, fostering empathy and understanding. "This isn't about blame," Alexandra told them during an introductory session. "It's about learning and growing so we can serve our guests better and each other." Next, she overhauled the hiring process to ensure it was fair and equitable. Gone were the subjective criteria that favored certain appearances or backgrounds. Instead, candidates were evaluated based on skills, experience, and cultural fit, with diverse panels conducting interviews to minimize bias. Alexandra also established partnerships with organizations that supported underrepresented communities, creating pipelines for talent that had long been overlooked. Within months, the hotel's workforce began to reflect the rich diversity of its clientele, a shift that didn't go unnoticed by guests. But Alexandra didn't stop there. She introduced initiatives aimed at giving back to the community. Local artists, many of whom came from minority backgrounds, were invited to display their work in the hotel's lobby, turning the space into a rotating gallery. Minority-owned businesses were given opportunities to supply products ranging from toiletries to gourmet snacks, further supporting economic empowerment. Guests frequently commented on how these small touches made the hotel feel more vibrant, authentic, and connected to the world outside its walls. Perhaps the most impactful change was the creation of a guest feedback system specifically designed to address issues of discrimination or bias. A dedicated hotline was set up where patrons could report concerns anonymously, knowing their voices would be heard without fear of retaliation. Any complaint was investigated thoroughly, and corrective actions were taken swiftly. This transparency not only rebuilt trust, but also sent a clear message: intolerance would not be tolerated. As word of these changes spread, the hotel's reputation soared. Travelers seeking inclusive environments began flocking to the property, eager to support a brand aligned with their values. Online reviews praised the warm, welcoming atmosphere and exceptional service. One guest wrote, "From the moment I walked in, I felt seen and appreciated. It's rare to find a place that truly lives up to its promises." Another noted, "You can tell this hotel is run by someone who cares deeply about people. The difference shows in every detail." Even longtime skeptics within the industry started taking notice. Competitors quietly studied Alexandra's methods, realizing that her approach wasn't just morally right. It was good business. Revenue increased, employee morale improved, and customer loyalty reached an all-time high. Awards began pouring in, recognizing the hotel as a leader in innovation, sustainability, and social responsibility. For Alexandra, the transformation was deeply fulfilling. Walking through the newly revitalized property, she saw smiles on the faces of both employees and guests. She heard laughter in the halls and conversations filled with genuine warmth. What had once been a symbol of exclusion was now a beacon of hope, a testament to what could be achieved when leadership chose compassion over complacency. Though challenges remained, Alexandra knew the foundation had been laid. The hotel wasn't perfect, but it was moving in the right direction, a direction defined by equality, respect, and humanity. And as she stood in the lobby, watching sunlight stream through the windows, Alexandra felt a quiet pride. The journey had been difficult, but every step had been worth it. The next day, Marcus and Sarah arrived at the hotel, ready to put Alexandra's plan into action. Dressed in similar casual attire, jeans, sneakers, and jackets, they approached the front desk separately, ensuring their interactions were spaced out enough to avoid suspicion. Both carried small cameras discreetly tucked into their clothing, capturing every moment of their encounters with the staff. Marcus went first. He walked up to the same clerk who had turned Alexandra away the previous night. With a friendly smile, he introduced himself and asked for a room. "Hi, I'm looking for a place to stay tonight. Do you have anything available?" he said, keeping his tone light and polite. The clerk glanced up briefly, his expression already shifting into one of indifference. Without bothering to check the system, he replied, "Sorry, we're fully booked." His voice lacked warmth, and he didn't even ask for Marcus's name or ID. It was clear he had already made up his mind. Undeterred, Marcus pressed further. "Are you sure? I called earlier today, and someone mentioned there might still be vacancies." The clerk hesitated for a second, clearly annoyed by the persistence. Finally, he tapped on his keyboard, pretending to look. After a long pause, he shook his head again. "Nope, nothing available. You'll need to try somewhere else." Marcus thanked him politely and stepped aside, making sure to record the entire exchange. As he moved away from the counter, he noticed how quickly the clerk turned his attention to other tasks, dismissing him entirely. The interaction left a bitter taste in Marcus's mouth, but he knew it was exactly what Alexandra needed to see. 20 minutes later, Sarah approached the desk. She mirrored Marcus's approach, asking if there were any rooms available. The difference was immediate. The clerk's demeanor brightened as soon as he saw her. He greeted her warmly, offering a wide smile that hadn't been present during Marcus's visit. "Of course. Let me see what we can do for you," he said enthusiastically. Within moments, he pulled up several options on his screen. "We actually have a few rooms left. Would you prefer a city view or something quieter?" Sarah played along, acting surprised by the availability. "Oh, that's great. I thought this place might be full. I'll take whatever is easiest for you." The clerk chuckled, clearly eager to please. "No problem at all. Let's get you checked in." He processed her reservation smoothly, handing over a keycard with a flourish. "Enjoy your stay." Once outside, Marcus and Sarah met up near the parking lot. They compared notes, shaking their heads at the blatant disparity in treatment. "It's disgusting," Sarah muttered, her cheeks flushed with anger. You could tell he didn't even want to entertain Marcus, but with me, he couldn't have been more helpful. Back at Alexandra's office, the team gathered around her desk to review the footage. Alexandra watched intently, her jaw tightening as she observed the stark contrast between the two interactions. The evidence was undeniable. This wasn't just poor customer service, it was systemic discrimination. And it wasn't limited to the front desk. When they reviewed security camera feeds from the lobby, they noticed subtle patterns. Black guests being ignored or given less attention, while white guests received prompt and courteous service. But Alexandra didn't stop there. She instructed her team to dig deeper, analyzing employee training manuals, hiring practices, and guest feedback records. What they uncovered painted an even grimmer picture. Many employees admitted off the record that they had been told to prioritize certain types of guests over others. Some revealed that management discouraged them from engaging too much with minority patrons, fearing complaints or complications. With all the pieces falling into place, Alexandra felt a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, but also determination. This wasn't just about punishing individuals. It was about dismantling a culture of bias that had festered unchecked for years. Armed with irrefutable proof, she knew the next step would be decisive. It was time to confront those responsible, not just the frontline staff, but the executives who allowed such behavior to thrive under their watch. As she prepared for the upcoming meeting with senior management, Alexandra reminded herself why she was doing this. It wasn't just about vindication. It was about creating a world where no one else would have to endure what she and countless others had faced. The fight ahead wouldn't be easy, but Alexandra Hart was ready.